So thank you all so much for having me here today. I'm really excited to chat to you all. And I'm actually going to be talking to you today about burnout while extremely burned out. So this is going to be like a weird sort of meta performance art thing. To give you a bit of background about myself, my name is Jessica Rose. I'm currently a technical manager at FutureLearn. And this isn't a plug so much as me saying they're not the ones that burn me out. They're cool, we're cool. Before I did that, I was working as a contracting consultant in developer relations. So I would come onto an early stage startup team for 6 months or for a year, and I would do incredibly stressful things and travel around the world and smile. And that gets old a little bit fast, mostly the smiling. And you may be asking, you were like, well, why are you talking to me about burnout? We're focusing on craft and we're focusing on sustainability. Jess, because we're on a first name basis now, right? It's an audience saying, you'd loan me money. I love how everybody was laughing politely. It was somebody back there was like, no. And I would love to stand up on stage and really earnestly tell you that I'm here to talk about the craft of living well. I'm here to talk to you about being your best self, bringing your best self to work. But that's really earnest, and I'm pretty burned out. So I'm going to be honest instead. It would be fantastic to view life as this craft that everything you do, you want to bring your best self to every day. But I want to talk to you about burnout because if you're burned out, you're not crafting anything. You're not getting good work done for yourself, for your personal life, for your job, for your hobbies. If you're really burned out, you're miserably treading water at best. And I'm really excited. I'm an American living in Britain, so I'm generally a little bit too excited about most things. But I'm really excited about a couple things in particular. I love computers. I love the brain and psychology. And I actually quite like swearing, but I try not to do it on video. So let's try and get at least 2 of those things into this talk. I want to talk to you about cognitive psychology. And cognitive psychology really came into its own for the first time, I think, in the 1960s. And they were doing a really cool thing where they were describing mental processes in the brain in terms of mechanical thinking and computational thinking. So there are 2 topics we're going to touch on really quickly. And the first one is working memory. And for technologists, this is going to feel really familiar. Working memory is your capacity to run processes mentally. It's how much you can fit into your mental model. It's all right? It's all right. The other one is cognitive load. If working memory is how much capacity you have, cognitive load is how much is being used. So if it's every mental process you have, either actively thinking about at the moment or things running in the background, are all taking up your working memory. It's like, well, I've got a bunch of emails I haven't really dealt with yet. I'm not quite sure, but I think the HMRC deadline was yesterday. I have got a lot of laundry to do. Oh my God, that thing, there's that thing. Oh. And much like any kind of performance, the closer you get to your capacity, the less performance you get out of it. The closer you get to using up all of your working memory, the less good a job you're doing on all of your processes. And working memory gets a little bit more complicated. Working memory is your ideal capacity, how good you could possibly be. This glass, if this is our sort of mental model of what working memory is, this is not always how much you have. Your working memory changes throughout your life, and it changes day to day. If you had a fantastic night's sleep last night, you had a great breakfast, everything's going okay, you're really excited, you didn't have too much to eat at lunch, you only had 1 beer. For those of you watching the video, instead of joining us, there was really fancy beer. You might be doing great. You've got a huge amount of working memory. You could top that up with all kinds of ridiculous nonsense. This person can go ahead and worry about taxes. That's fine. But let's say that you didn't have a fantastic night's sleep. You maybe had a talk today, and you decided to rejig all of your slides at 2 in the morning. You could still get a lot done, but you don't have as much to work with. Everything you add to your diminished capacity is going to have a much larger impact. And burnout just takes a huge chunk off the top. When talking especially to technologists, I like to talk about burnout as sort of having the impact, talking about burnout and talking about working memory as sort of having a bunch of browser tabs open. Burnout is you loading that project with an infinite loop in the background of one of your tabs and then trying to get work done around that. It's not going to work. It's not really helping anyone. But when I burned out for the first time, when I was coming to burnout for the first time, I had incredibly helpful people in my life that would say, "Hey, Jess," because they know me and they would loan me money. Jess, you've got to stop doing all these things. You're going to burn out. And when they told me this, I hadn't burned out before. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do too much and then I'll crash hard for a weekend and it's fine. It's fine. And that's not the deal. So burnout actually seems to be quite serious, and it'll mess you up pretty good. And when we talk about burnout, we're going to be talking about occupational burnout. There's a lot of different types of burnout. Caregiver burnout, emotional burnout, and we're really just talking about the burnout you get from doing too much work. It can be paid work, it can be volunteer, it can be your hobby, it can be real. Do people still play WoW? One person. It can be really grinding with your guild way too much. We're talking about occupational burnout. It's the burnout you get from doing too much. And burnout's really defined as exhaustion. And fantastically, or maybe not fantastically, it's mental, emotional, and physical exhaustion. Everything you have that powers you through life, you're running pretty near empty on that. It's the result of long-term stress that feels unavoidable. And the feeling here is the important part. It may be something you can escape, but it's stress that you feel like you can't move past. It's that toxic job. It's that long-term battle. It's that thing that you feel like you can't get away from. And what makes burnout really insidious is it mirrors the symptoms of depression while at the same time making you more susceptible, not only to depression, but a whole host of physical and mental ailments. I found out I was burned out when I went to my GP with headaches. And I was like, well, I've got these headaches, but I've really got to get on a plane. What can you do? And my GP's fantastic. We had a nice chat. She's like, well, what are you doing? I was like, well, I've got this job. Please have some information about this job. She's like, okay, well, here's for your headaches. Here's an antidepressant if you want it. And here's a handwritten note suggesting you quit your job. And it was fantastic to have somebody say, in a medical capacity, that job sounds like a terrible idea. You should stop doing that. And she didn't say it, but it was go work in ed tech was highly implied. But how do you detect burnout if you don't want to go to your GP, or if your GP, or for those of you outside of a British context, if your doctor doesn't really have time to sit down and chat with you? We're going to talk about ways to detect burnout. I really love to run highly interactive talks, but asking people to raise their hands for this seems a little bit weird. Since we're in a really well-lit audience, instead of raising your hands, please feel free to make increasingly pained expressions every time one of these checklist points applies to you. And these are checklist points from the Mayo Clinic on detecting occupational burnout. Ready? Everybody, neutral face? This is not a helpful neutral face. So, anybody getting real cynical or critical at work? All right, Britishes. Are you dragging yourself to work and then feeling defeated when you get there? A lot of folks are like, that's just a job, right? Who hates people? Or you don't hate them, you're just a little bit done, right? This one I'm suspicious of. That's consistently productive. That's a high mark. But are you just sort of drained? You're not getting stuff done. You don't have the energy. And just even thinking about doing all the stuff you have to do is exhausting. Are you not able to see your own successes? You get something done and you're like, well, that's a thing. I better drag myself onto the next thing. Who's disillusioned about their job? Can't tell if somebody's laughing or crying. Oh, wow, I don't know if our mission makes a difference. I don't know if I'm doing good work. I don't know whether or not late-stage capitalism was a lie. Like, right? Are you using food, drugs, alcohol, or video games, whoever said wow, to feel better or to escape? Have your sleep habits or appetite changed drastically? And is your body doing weird stuff? For other people who are getting old, this also gets hard to tell. I'm like, yeah, but I lifted a thing last week. You're like, young people, it doesn't last forever. So, take a mental tally where you're like, and you might be thinking, you're like, well, I only had like 2 of those, I'm probably fine. You're gonna be delighted to hear that the Mayo Clinic says that if you have 1 or more of these symptoms, you may be suffering from burnout. Yeah. So let's look at maybe how to get better. Recovering from burnout really depends on how quickly you catch it. If you are looking out for the signs, you're looking out for the symptoms, you're checking in with yourself, and you're slowing down when you notice that things get bad, you've got a great opportunity to just slow down a little bit and reboot. But literally no one does this. If you're getting burned out, especially if you're being burned out for the first time, chances are you're not going to notice until you hit a crisis point. That sucks, but let's look at how to come back from those crisis points. The first thing I was warned is none of this advice is meant to substitute for medical advice. If you're worried that you're having a mental or physical health crisis, or if you really want some extra support, please go talk to a medical professional. If you're wondering whether or not what your problems are a crisis, that's probably a crisis. Go talk to your doctor. If you're here in the UK, it's free at the point of service. Just go. They love to see you. Maybe my GP is just super nice. And the other thing I would warn is recovering from burnout is going to take longer than you think. Chipper, bouncy me of 2 years ago thought, oh, it's just going to be a long weekend watching Netflix. Recovering from burnout can take weeks and weeks, months and months, or some people talk about it taking a year or more. Like, it's going to suck for a while. And this is going to be a quick poll. Please just look smug if this is you. Can anybody afford to take a large chunk off of work? There's a lot of people like, yeah. Spend more time with my horses. I don't know what rich people have. If you can afford to take a long chunk of time off work, just do that. Take some time off, do whatever makes you focused and centered. I use an artist who's absolutely brilliant for my slides, but I mistakenly, in conversation, told her what I do when I'm really stressed. So she drew that. And if anybody else does eat cake in the bath, please come see me because I've got an ongoing argument with someone who's probably my husband. That this is not gross or weird. I'm told shower beers are a thing too. If you can take a big chunk of time off work and you're fried, go take a big chunk of time off work. You're done. We're done here. Take care of yourself. Take naps. Do normal human things to unwind. But for the rest of us who don't have horses and can't take a big chunk of time off work, there are smaller things we can do to try and get ourselves okay. Try and do less in ways that aren't going to screw up your life. Do less, but in ways that future you is going to be okay with. Keep up with tax deadlines. Be nice to your spouse. Show up at work if you can't afford to get fired. Wherever you can, and probably not with your job, try to outsource. So super burned out, I'm still running a podcast, and the only way I do that is I book a call, record, and then pay someone money to do work. You can also outsource without money by asking for help. I got my husband to do all of the holiday shopping this year. That is a huge amount of cognitive load. I'm never doing it again. My favorite thing about being burned out, about being in the recovery mode, is you get so good at saying no once you start practicing. You may feel bad about it. You're like, well, someone's coming to me for help. And I've gotten in the habit of being really helpful, so these days people come up and say, hey, Jess, do you want to do this thing for free? I'm just like, no. And there's always a long, expectant pause where I'm like, no? Like, what? No, thank you? Like, what are we? And you can feel bad saying no about stuff, but it's really about taking care of yourself first. If you're not able to get stuff done, you can't help anyone. Look how cute that blurry little kid is, I guess. She's still putting on her own mask before helping children. Absolutely. If you're in a crisis mode, or lots of times even if you can't take care of yourself before you're able to help anyone else. I already said that I try not to swear on stage, so let's do this. Decide where you're investing emotionally. Pick your battles. So does anybody know about mom swears? Cool. You totally know about these, but you haven't heard them called mom swears. It's where your mom really wanted to cuss, and you knew the word she was saying, but she was going to say Christmas instead. Possibly an American thing. But my advice is you can only give a heck about so many things, and is this something you want to spend your hecks on? So somebody comes to you with something ridiculous at work, the opportunity to get into a battle where you're like, no, not today. Ask people for help. Let them know you need help. And just recharge. Do whatever it is, even if you can't take time off work and spend time with your horses. Do the stuff that makes you feel good. And practice forgiveness. Not necessarily other people. You can deal with them later. You're putting on your own mask. Forgive yourself. Like, cut yourself a little bit of slack. You've got this much cognitive load. As long as you don't leave the stove on, it's all fine. And try not to be a jerk. Like, future you is going to need some human relationships. So the TLDR, you're going to need to do less stressful stuff, and really decide where you're going to fight. I've got exactly 3 minutes, so let's do this super fast. I'm going to tell you a secret superpower that you get from the recovery phase of burnout. Maybe take a little bit of a detour about why this doesn't suck. Very recently, I went to a conference, and I ran into somebody I hadn't seen in ages, and they pointed out to me, indirectly, the upside of being super burned out and being in recovery mode. They came up, they're like, Jess, because they would loan me money. How are you doing? Oh my God, I didn't know you were pregnant. And before being super burned out, I might have responded with appropriate emotional input. I might have felt bad for weeks. Be like, oh God, have I put on a bunch of weight? Is this dress? This dress is great. Does this dress not work? Like, oh, but burnout, Jess, like, I still punished them with a long silence, just like, nope, not pregnant. You? He didn't get it. But what I'm suggesting is, please don't burn out if you can avoid it. But if you do get to be burned out and you get yourself into this recovery mode, enjoy the hell out of the superpowers. Don't answer that email unless it's your boss. Don't invest emotionally in nonsense. Just let it go and run cheerfully on 20%. Thank you so much.